Hello, Mudasir.
Hi, Sai. How are you doing today?
I am well, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. I'm looking forward for our conversation.
Most definitely. So I have to say I have missed you this year in 2023 because we haven't done enough of these. So I'm looking forward
hmm
to this one and future ones this year.
Absolutely, and yeah, it was a decent enough break that we haven't done quite a few this year, and we are looking forward for this, and I hope our audience also looking forward for this.
Most definitely, most definitely. So kind of diving right in, I'll kind of really ask you to introduce yourself briefly, and then I'll introduce myself, and we'll introduce our guest, Mudasir.
Definitely. Ever so briefly, I am Mudasir, and I am a leadership and transformation coach. I work with teams and leaders across the levels to identify the opportunities and challenges in helping everyone operate at their best to achieve the business outcomes. And how about you, Sai? Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Mudasir. Likewise, I'm a business coaching consultant, really focusing on transformation and change. And as I like to say, I partner with organizations at every level to help them really calibrate their business models and operating models to maximize their impact. My passion beyond that, or beneath the surface, I should say, I have many passions, quite honestly, is really to be a catalyst and an alchemist and helping organizations and individuals embrace the sacred triad, dealing with reality, dealing with human nature and their own identity to ensure that they come together through an aliveness that achieves that impact that they have. So, for lack of any other words, I enjoy what I do and I try to live life to the fullest with great people like Mudasir and our guest Ivo today. So that's about me, my good friend. So,
Thank
Mudasir,
you.
Mudasir, if you're good, I'm going to mention a few things and we'll introduce our guest if that works.
Most certainly. Please go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So one of the immediate things about Ivo is that grabbed me about his book, Paradoxical Leadership, which just came out, is title is extremely elegant. I have to say it. It is essentially how to make complexity an advantage. Notice that the Ivo did not say how to deal with anxiety uh, or anything else beyond that, but complexity, the richness of reality, if you will.
Mhm.
So if I were to make a suggestion, I would say there's only one better word than complexity, and that's reality. And so the tagline grabbed me completely. So that was one. Two, the quote that we've used, if you will, really, and I want to emphasize a few things before Ivo comes in. You know,
Mhm.
how do we as leaders involve multiple alternatives, bring them together, look at the world in different ways, look at the continuing balancing act of interweaving the interdependencies of opposing forces, and sometimes they get closer together, sometimes we move them apart. A lot of people are under the context of let's remove the tension. No, let's work with the tension. And I love the work that Ivo is putting out into the world, to be very, very frank about it.
Yeah.
um, so that was very key, and I really appreciate he emphasizes, you know, leaders have to monitor, safeguard the balance, short term and long term. So a lot of good things. Um,
Yes.
and I want to add one. I want to add one more thing because, like I said, I really, quite honestly, fell in love with the book. And I have to say, before he's here, with all due respect to Ivo, I fell in love with Ivo as well because he wrote something about himself completely grabbed me. Um, he writes in his book his fascination with polarities, right? Fascination with polarities, and he embodies it, and he says it so eloquently. People will be grabbed by the description, if you will. He says it has to do with who I am and how I feel about life, and his motto of nothing in moderation, everything in access.
Mhm.
Just
Mhm.
absolutely brilliant, if you will.
Yes.
And then definitively, he emphasizes, and again, I'm going on a little bit, but hopefully you're right. I'm extremely excited for our guest today. He talks about the magical moment when two
Mhm.
opposite forces come together to form one new whole. And with all due respect, it's those magical moments that have fueled my life. To be very frank about it, and that's one of the many reasons why I am so excited, and Mudasir so excited to have you here with us, Ivo. So welcome, my good man.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And what a great introduction to hear.
You're most welcome. So I'm going to dive right in if you're okay, Mudasir and Ivo. Who is Ivo? Please share with the world, my good friend. Who are you?
Yeah. Well, I live in Antwerp. That is a big port in Belgium. One of the biggest ports in Europe. A medieval city. It's let's say 30 miles north of Brussels and 100 miles south of Amsterdam. Somewhere there. And well, I'm paradox in myself, let's say, as you already pointed out. I'm a philosopher. I study philosophy, and I'm a management consultant. I worked 25 years for an international management consultancy. And there's also an interesting tension, because as a philosopher, yeah, you are trained to ask the questions where there is no clear answer, and as a consultant, you are paid to give solutions to complex issues. So, in fact, sometimes these two aspects of myself can clash, because you cannot return eternally to your client saying, well, what is the deeper purpose of all these? No, there has something to be delivered. So in the past, I solved it by being a philosopher in the weekend and being a consultant in the week. But anyway, that is something like, doesn't feel so natural. So what I'm now trying to do is not implementing change or encouraging change by having these beautiful models or 5 steps implementation plans, but just as Socrates, asking the right questions and stimulating people to take on this change path themselves. But it's still a struggle between, let's say, the blue suit and the white stola of the philosopher. But anyway, it's my personal tension, and also I think one of the why the team grabs me so much is that my mother was Dutch and my father was Flemish, Belgian. For you, it's one and the same language, but anyway, two different cultures. So you're raised in a kind of bicultural environment, and you have to, well, switch between different registers. It's a different culture, and there, well, I think it's also maybe ingrained a little bit my passion for the subject that I'm writing about, and already a subject that, well. When I studied philosophy, I wrote my thesis about the logical paradoxes. But anyway, we're now at more, let's say, more at the practical level. At this moment, I've now, this is my 4th book. My first book in English, my other 3 books were in Dutch, and I started, let's say, in 2008, in 2009, thinking, well, I was not intended to write a book about paradoxes, but I was wondering on the question, how can we live in a sustainable way? Because I traveled a lot in Europe, using a lot of air miles, and there, examining this question, you often come to a kind of tension between the world of well, unlimited growth on the one side, and it's the paradigm of all economic growth, but also personal development. You want to experience everything, you want to see everything, but that is a strong contrast of really diminishing or making your footprint as small as possible. And well, often there you come in a kind of dilemma. Are you for growth, or for sustainability? And when you can have a compromise in between somewhere. You say, well, I eat a little bit less meat, or I'm less traveling by plane or whatever. But my question was, can you do both? Can you, let's say, grow as a person or an economy, unlimitedly, and on the other side, also shrink or lower your footprint? Well, Is that possible? Well, maybe it was 2008. It was the time of Second Life. That is the predecessor of the metaverse. We say, oh well, maybe we can grow in the digital world, or let's say our imagination is also unlimited. So why can't we grow in our in our imagination? But I don't say that these are the solutions, but anyway, it triggered my thinking about, if you look at every societal problem, how can you have a both ends solution? That is one of the big drivers why I'm interested in this topic. But on the other side, I was also a consultant, and I often saw that organizations flip-flop from one side or the other. Right? They go the central, and then they decentralize, and 5 years later they're going back again. And well, if I quote it cynically, it's a good business model for a consultant. But anyway, the question is this a sustainable way of developing, of growing? Because everything what you have built up, you is destroyed in the next movement and build up again. So that is also my trigger about looking to another way of bringing together these two poles. And in fact, well, but you don't write 4 books about the topic because you want to, of course I want to change the world and I want to make organizations better, but anyway I write books because I want to better understand myself. That is what what you're also saying, and it's interesting. So since my youth, well, it's like you said, society. It's about identity. Who are you really? Because if I'm doing a personality test, for example, if I want to do one personality test, I'm an extreme extrovert.
Yeah.
If I do another, I'm an extreme introvert, and it's both. It's true. So the question is, who is the real Ivo? Does he exist, or is he just, let's say, a melting pot of all these differences? And is he kind of, let's say, the observer of all these elements that are in itself? So that's a very interesting question. And also in this time where you see identity is a very, very hot topic. Who are you? You want to limit your identity to one point because that is clear and it's predictable, and then that is someone like this or that. But is it not much more rich to have all these aspects of yourself, both your progressive side, but also your conservative side, or your innovative side, but also your need for stability? So it's also in my all the keynotes or trainings I give, it's also a very liberating perspective that people see. Well, I can be all these aspects. I'm not. I don't need to limit myself to one of these aspects of myself. I can be in my full my full potential, like you said. So, well, a long introduction. Why the theme interests me? So, passion really is a passion for me. It's not because, well, I worked 25 years for a consultancy. Was very happy there. But it is also interesting that the time frame. My first book was in exactly 10 years ago, but 10 years ago the time was not there because I worked very, very hard on this most beautiful book, the best book ever written. But after 1 year, it was a little bit discounted and it was remainder books, so it did not sell.
Yeah.
That's strange, and I was very frustrated because I really believed in what I wrote. And anyway, I wrote a second book. I think, well, I'm just because I believe in it. I wrote a second book, and it was published 4 years later. And then that book became an incredible success. It was picked up everywhere, and so much that it is now my full-time job to give keynotes, etc. And that's not because I've been a better writer. Probably I am, but it's because the time has changed incredibly, and now people are really struggling with the aspect of, well, the linear solutions that we tried in the past don't work anymore if we face these complex and wicked problems that we have in the world today. So we need, in fact, this more kind of balancing polarity-like view on things. I'm very happy that what I believed in, let's say 10 years ago, has now become reality, and also now with a global coverage, what is still much better than only the Netherlands and Belgium.
Definitely, and you know, zooming out, if you will, and I definitely I emphasize the subtitle, you know, complexity versus just saying anxiety or adversity or something. Zooming out, what are the societal complexities that you feel kind of are really now making this central, paradoxes and leadership and what have you as such?
Are you still there, Simon?
Yep. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was a little bit distracted.
No worries, my friend. No worries. I would love to have your perspective on kind of the societal considerations that make paradoxical leadership so relevant today, if you will.
Of course. It's certainly in the US, but also in Europe, polarization is a very, very big issue, and in fact, polarization can easily, it's of course driven by uncertainty, and uncertainty is a big societal factor in this world today, and uncertainty and complexity. And it's also interesting that this gives rise to a polarity, because how do you deal with this uncertainty, complexity? A lot of people who are, clinging a little bit on to the past, saying, well, this is the simple solutions of the past, the leader who has the clear direction, etc. That is one side. And you see that rising. You see a lot of authoritarian leaders. You see a lot of, let's say, traditionalism, in the sense of, getting this traditions, these frameworks that give rest and clarity, etc. On the other hand, there is the need to embrace that complexity, and to not simplify it, but also to handle it, because you can say, well, let's do chaos theory, but people, it's in the human nature to have structure, to have a clear direction, etc. So, and what I try with my book and my work is to embrace this complexity, but on the other hand, give people handles to work with it in a very practical way, without being instrumental, without being that it's just a kind of trick or an instrumentalism. So it's very interesting that you see this evolution in society, because we are in a transition time between a very stable world to a world that has become increasingly unpredictable, etc. And you see a lot of, the big challenges of today, climate, migration, economy, etc. There you see, simple solutions don't work anymore, because you say, we need to prevention, but you also have to have strict rules. You have to do both. You have to work on different levels at the same time, and you see that often with political parties, especially in if I see it here in Europe. Then we have the solution, and that is one part of the problem. That is one part of the issue, and then after the elections come the new party, and they have the other piece of the solution. But anyway, you need to combine both, and I think also because I work a lot with big cities like Rotterdam or Amsterdam, to have this dialogue with the citizens in another way, just not in a kind of either or, are you for or against this, but how can you combine the strength of living sustainable, but on the other hand, having mobility, because people need to drive, and to how can you combine them? And it is not giving the solution, but asking the question. Asking the question is stimulating all these different stakeholders to come up with creative solutions themselves. And as a leader, I think you have to define what I call the paradoxical challenge. Let's say for an organization, how can we use the power of economies of scale on the one hand, but also stay close to our customers? How can we do that? Just raising the question and having all the stakeholders involved, that stimulates creative and innovative thinking. So I'm working now with the city of Rotterdam, with different, they have different neighborhoods, and there are citizens who are representative of these neighborhoods, but they have to discuss on basic things. Are we going to have a playground, or do we have a car park? And are you against the car park or against the playground? Anyway, what is it really about? And going beyond really the content, and going and making this balance shift together. And that's one of my purposes also, to work on a better world on a smaller scale, on a small and tangible scale.
Yeah. Ivo, your work resonates so deeply. You talk about a lot of these things. I talk about the in-between. There's order and disorder. The in-between is where the magic happens. You got to pull it. Otherwise, we're polarized. We literally will rip the fabric of society apart if we don't move toward the in-between in that paradoxical way. And if you don't mind, I'm gonna be a little bit tactical in some of the things that you have in the book, because they're so valuable. But before I go there, one thing I really want people listening to this to take away, and this has driven me as well, the questions we ask are so important, and we have to start with questions, because they force us to embrace the humanity and the humility and the frailty, if you will, as human beings, before we simply jump to an answer that emphasizes ego. So the question is so powerful. I've gone as far as a consultant, I've gone as far as to say with clients, or actually test them, to say, why are you hiring me? Do you want just answers, or do you want questions? And they said, and if they just say, hey, we want answers, I said, well, you're probably not a good fit then, because we got to start with the questions together before we get, be curious before you get creative. So I love I absolutely, truly, truly love your thinking. I want to hone in on something and have you comment on it from the book. You talk about paradoxical skills, and I love the way that you describe this. I'm going to throw them out there and kind of help us sort of, and you gave us an example already of how you practice these. Self-observation you emphasize is step one. Likewise, self-analyze. A lot of people don't spend time observing; they just dump to analyze. Allowing discomfort. These are key words, right? Exploratory attitude. You talk about different styles, both and thinking, and then dialogue, the importance of dialogue, and then vulnerability and humility. Ivo, those skills, are you seeing them manifest? How can we better embrace those skills, Ivo? And please elaborate as you see fit.
Yeah, it's interesting, because these are skills that everyone can develop in one way or another. And I think these are more, let's say, because these are what I call competencies on the meta level. And in fact, you have basic competencies like, are you more structured, or are you more flexible, or is it people oriented or task oriented? These meta competencies are really to see in what context I can apply these aspects of myself. So it requires that I think these are more, let's say, internally focused skills. And what is we often have competencies that are really action oriented, outward reaching, etc. That is great, but I think the internal competencies of having And I think this aspect of self-observation is very important, because you are, as a part of the setting where you work in, you are influencing that by your behaviors, by doing things or not doing things. Um, and you can say, oh, you blame it on others because they don't understand you, etc. But making this self-reflection, okay, right, and how am I dealing with these polarities? I know, for example, I'm a control freak, very hard, very. And I give you an example how these skills work for me. For example, I work with a colleague, and we often have a kind of different view on how to do workshops and trainings, because I'm more, let's say, the conceptual one, and she likes very much all these kind of playful games to really that are that help people to learn. But anyway, I want the content. And then we have this tension, and I try to, with all kind of arguments, say, well, let's keep all these childish kind of exercises. We have to be serious, etc. But then I make the reflection, okay, right, but this is really my need for control, because why do I need that? Yeah, in fact, because I'm anxious that people don't find me serious enough, or I want to have control, because what happens if there is no time to do other things, etc. That is something of myself instead of projecting it in the other. And then also the step of self-awareness, but also self-analysis. What are the deeper drivers below this? Then going to this discomfort is allowing that let's try this out, and maybe this feels a little bit tense to me, because I think, well, is that going the right direction or not? But allowing this discomfort to happen, there new things can arise. And for me, it has I see that people just like these kind of exercises. And that helps people to internalize what they have to learn. And then you start this exploratory mindset. There's a strength in it. It's not only something that I discarded, but there's a strength in it. And then I can start switching, maybe trying in a very limited environment, a kind of exercise. It works well. And then you can see what is for me, for myself, a kind of both-end solution. What would be, let's say, for me, the way to combine seriousness, because and playfulness in one. And then, well, also the quality of my dialogue with my colleague improves, because then I can tune into her world. And of course, and then the last one, what you talk about, is this humility or this vulnerability. It's not about me. It's not about it's not about what I want to send. It's fact what I want, what the person who is in the training or in the session wants to grab. And therefore, maybe I have to put my ego aside, because I have this beautiful expose that is now put aside for some, what I say, stupid exercise. But it helps, in fact, more the person who learns than it is putting me on a stage. So that's a little bit, and it's difficult, these skills, because I make the same mistake as everyone's, but you're more conscious about it. You say, hey, right, I'm in. And this self-reflection is, I think, the first most critical step to start stepping out of it, stepping out of the patterns where you used to be. And that's easy, because you're in these patterns, and that gives you comfort because you are who you are, etc. But then stepping out, you can break them, and you can improve relationships. You can become a better person, let's say, innovate and enrich your potential, because you grab things that other people can bring to you, and instead of spitting it out, incorporated it and make it in your own and becoming broader as a person.
Very well said. And I want to emphasize a few words, if you will, that you called out, and definitively we've had numerous conversations, and in my own work and Mudasir's work, the ego plays such a big role relative to identity, and also the illusion, I'll say, of control, because we really control quite little in the reality, if you will, because reality has her own thing, nature, and then and what have you. So there is such power in digesting what you have, and I love the way that you start with self-observation before self-analysis, if you will, because if we don't observe ourselves, people presume they're already observing themselves, and they're not, and that plays right into it. So very, very powerful, Ivo, all around. Mudasir, my good friend, I've dominated the conversation selfishly. Forgive me. So please jump in.
Yeah, I apologize for my interruption due to poor internet. So, couple of things, and it was a great conversation. I was listening to you about illusion of control, ego, all that stuff, and then I get to a point where how can one can overcome, or we can overcome the ego and tap into our creativity to shape a new or more positive reality. You touched upon that briefly. Can you please elaborate that a bit more?
Yeah. Well, I think, and that is my thinking about shadow. That is, I think it's not the challenge to overcome ego, because ego is there and we need ego. I think
Yeah.
it is to be aware when ego comes in, and we and I often see that, for example, in kind of more, let's say, with spiritual people. They say, well, I try to transcend my ego, and I'm very good at this. Look at me being so spiritual. In fact, what they're doing is showing ego on another level. Instead of saying, well, I have a beautiful car, let's see my car, they say, see myself being very spiritual, etc. So it is there because we're human beings, but the only way you can deal with that is to recognize it with yourself and say, well, right, okay, let's have my moment of fame. Let's have my my ego there. But anyway, trying to control it, like you said, Si, you cannot control it. It is there. It is part of our human condition. But you can observe it, and you can direct it in a good direction if you want. And you need ego sometimes, because you need to give your message across, etc. But it's also important that it doesn't stand in the way of achieving success for the growth, the greater whole. For example, I work a lot with executives, of chief executives. They have an important impact on the organization, and sometimes their impact is very much needed. They have to, let's say, what is chaotic, they have to structure, etc. And they go on with that, and they're successful in this. But they can also overshoot. They can also exaggerate, because that is their thing. That is structure and KPIs and control, etc. But then it becomes dysfunctional. It becomes a liability, and then they become dysfunctional for the organization. But they haven't seen it, and it's some executives are capable of changing their direction. They're saying, well, okay, we have now had enough from this structuring and this the controlling, etc. I'm going more to the empowering and the coaching side, and leaving a room for people to innovate, etc. They make the turn themselves. But not everyone has these two aspects in itself. Maybe you're very good at crisis management, but anyway, then you have to be aware, okay, maybe it's not me to take the organization a step further. I need, let's say, a colleague or a new executive that will take over my role to do that in my case. So it's always important to say what is needed for the organization, not is what is needed for my own benefit. And these both things can come together, but sometimes they can diverge. And then you have to be aware, okay, is it still aligned, or is it going in different directions? I don't know if it's a little bit an answer to your question, Mudasir.
And that's very perfect. So having certain amount of ego is necessary, and that builds a sense of identity. At the same time, finding the right balance of self-centeredness, in other words, inflated sense of a self. On that front, how do we balance in that area? And then if you can offer more insights, that would be quite powerful.
Yeah. Well, this humility, is important. You are, in fact, as a leader, you are a servant to a goal, and this goal is predominant. And there, I think your ego is an instrument. It's not a goal in itself. It's an instrument that you can say, well, now I need to be at the forefront and to etc. But it's an instrument rather than it is then it's a goal in itself. And there, I think that's important to be aware of that.
Thank you. Sai, do you have any questions? Please go ahead.
Definitely. I'm enjoying likewise the conversation, just if you will listen, because I think you've called it out perfect. Ego is essential, if you will, as a manifestation to maintain integrity to identity, but it can be overshot. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
As anything. And exactly, I love the way you described it, because a lot of times people pull back so much in the name sometimes of self-organizing that basically it breaks down. So literally, I'll say it this way. I've seen CEOs drive their companies into the ground by overshooting, being over controlling, if you will, or undershooting and missing the mark. And so I really, really appreciate, Ivo, your emphasis. The other thing which I really likewise appreciate is, and I'm mentioning this because I think these are very key as people embrace the work that you're doing. The best way to keep balance is expose ourselves to reality, because reality will help us gauge what's needed, the context, organization, etc. And Ivo, I would love for your thoughts, if you will, because this is another piece of the book, which I think are, again, very, very powerful. You talk about dealing with polarities, right? Kind of exploring that middle space, about recognizing, about naming and exploring those polarities, allowing the tension to, rather than eradicating the tension, if you will, allowing it, valuing it, and playing, as well as integrating, connecting, communicating, and serving. So I'd love to hear your guidance to organizations, to leaders out there, how to best do that.
Yeah, I think in these, it is interesting, because these different steps are also linked one-to-one to the competencies or the skills that you talked about earlier. I think there are three. If you make it simple, there are three basic steps. That is recognizing and naming them, because they're implicit. They're implicit in an organization. They're not. That's one thing, that is valuing both sides, but really valuing both sides, that giving the same value and trying to connect them. But anyway, the most important thing is to identify and to name them, because these are the tensions that everyone feels in an organization, but they are never made explicit. Often then you got a new management that say, well, the mission statement is we are client-centered, or we are result-focused, or whatever. But anyway, there is always another side to that client-centered, of course. But we have to have, let's say, efficient processes, and we have to we have standards. But on the other hand, we have to tailor-made solutions. So everyone in the organization senses this is a tension. Just by naming this, you give people the recognition that this is the thing that you are struggling with day to day. if you are a medic or a paramedic, for example, you have to be efficient. There's many patients but you have to also have the personal touch. You have the personal attention. Anyway, for a medical organization, this is a basic tension between being efficient and being very personal. And for everyone, the balance can be different. For example, in one situation, well, you can say, well, just move on because, but the other, we have to give this person a lot of attention, and that is really being very conscious to see what is needed in the situation. But as a leader, if you can identify these competencies or these polarities for the organization, that gives a lot of breathing space and a lot of recognition. So I do that with organization, that we identify what are now the three key polarities for the organization. For an insurance company, it is, let's say, entrepreneurial, but also managing risks, for example, and being for a city that is empowering the citizens, but also controlling and make sure that there are no offenses, etc. So it is. And these polarities, everyone feels within the organization. If you can name them, and if you can, then you can handle them. For a school, it is between, you have to have a standard for everyone, but there are pupils with different needs. So every teacher has to balance between having a general standard for everyone and having personal attention for people. So, and that is a process you can do with your whole organization, just mapping them down, and they come down to 2-3 essential ones. And there, then the next step is really valuing both, because you can say, well, efficiency is more important than personal attention, etc. But you need both, and what is the power of both? Then, in fact, then you can start thinking creatively. How can we connect them? Well, how can we come to a both-and situation? And I think first you need to live both sides of the paradox. Like you said, Si, is getting them separate before getting them back together. Because if you're starting to get some compromise immediately, then it's kind of grayish compromise thing. You need to have the purity of both sides, and then combining. It's kind of movement that you do all the time.
The purity and the appreciation of both. Exactly. I love the way you're emphasizing it, because without that, we discount them. We discount them if we don't treat them as unique. Was there a third step, Ivo, in the description as you're summarizing the steps that we laid out? Or was that?
Well, the first is naming it, making it explicit. Secondly, is valuing it. For example, I see organizations that say, well, we need both to innovate and to create stability. Big, large organizations, they have all kind of accountability, so they have to. And innovation is just trying out, seeing what works, what doesn't work. And often you see then that, and that is learning from mistakes. And often you see what happens, that the organization says, well, we are an organization that allows making mistakes, and we're a learning organization. But anyway, if there is a problem, then they're in the control mode. So what reality is, and what let's say the nice narrative is, that's two different worlds. So in fact, valuing is saying, well, really not just in words, but in acts, in practical, what you do, make them both as important. Both innovation and both stability are equally important. And the third is, well, how can you combine it? In my book, I describe the polarity wheel. There are different ways to combine these different sides. It's not just, let's say, that you have a kind of ultimate synthesis with yin and yang coming together in a beautiful harmony. This can be, but it is these scarce magical moments that you describe, Si. These are things that you cannot make. These are things that often happens. But anyway, there are other ways to combine both. Maybe you if you say, well, hard work and playfulness, maybe you work hard 4 days a week and 1 day you play. So you can do the balance in different ways. And I describe 7 strategies in my book, and either or is also a strategy, because you sometimes have to go for one side, and then because that needs attention at this moment. And I describe these 7 strategies with their advantages and their limitations. So therefore, it's also important not to say, well, we're all tending to reach the ultimate yin and yang harmony thing, but it doesn't. Often that is not possible, or it is not desirable to do so. So be conscious. There are 7 ways to, or maybe there are 8 or 9, but I describe 7 strategies to do so. Choose one that helps you at this problem, at this moment, and that can be fine for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, etc. But also something that you have to revise in a dynamic way. It's like this whole thing about paradoxes, that is about dancing. In fact, it is really. It is not something that you go, well, now I have connected 2 opposites and they're now fine together. No, it's about going apart, coming together. It is doing this dance, but then in a very conscious way, not in a kind of thing that you are driven from one side or the other, what often happens, because you are going from one side or the other without even noticing it, because these are the patterns. Because for example, you want to go on a diet, then you're on a strict diet, and then you get so much hunger to eat something very sweet, and you go eating something, a pie or something, and then you have this feeling of guilt, and you go the other side. So you're flip-flopping yourself without even noticing. So in fact, that is doing this dance by yourself, but also with the people you work with, also your family, everything, everyone, your professional colleagues. It's kind of dance where you move, and where you can see, if you take this pole, other pole take that other pole. So it's a dynamic process.
Yeah, very, very well said. There's so many nuances. There's so many nuances to it, exactly as you're emphasizing all around. Gentlemen, I know we're approaching kind of our window, if you will. Ivo, if you're good to kind of offer us sort of some closing thoughts, my good friend.
Whoa. Well, I think that paradoxical leadership, it starts with yourself. I describe in my book how do you integrate paradoxical thinking in your organization, in your innovation process, or your strategy process, or in the structures in the organization, or your HR processes. But that's nice, and that's very important, but it starts with yourself, being aware of your own polarities in this, and handle the polarities that are within your circle of influence. I give the example of, are you at the soccer field where your son or daughter plays at a Saturday, and there are parents smoking around the field? Then there are different polarities. One of the polarity is your own polarity, is am I going to confront these parents, or am I going to say nothing and just keep the peace, etc.? For the club, the polarity is between having strict rules, or either, let's say, soft recommendation. For the Ministry of Health, it is about, let's say, health and inclusion. And for for your son or daughter is, am I loyal to my parents or am I loyal to my friends and their parents? So the polarities are at different levels. And it is, first of all, take ownership of your own polarities instead of trying to work. Then you can work on the polarities in the wider environment, but these are the things that you can really influence yourself. So I think that's an important one. And it's also, I think, the second thing is polarities are often not so obvious. We only see content. We see a discussion between Si and myself about, are we going to implement the system or not? Well, there is a whole world below that, because you have needs and anxieties that are, and I have values and needs and anxieties, and that is the level where we have to be to find kind of our dialogue and our solution to that. And the last thing that is about, also about the tension of myself writing this book, it is about mindset, but it's also about tools and instruments. And that's also a thin line, because if you're too much on the mindset, well, it gets too abstract. Huh? It gets, well, it's, oh, that's a nice idea, etc. But you need to instrumentalize to make it concrete, to make it in let's say, your innovation process or your way of working or your competencies, whatever. The risk is that you then make it too instrumental, that it is a kind that paradoxical leadership becomes a kind of trick, that you say, tick in the box, well, we're now paradoxically competent as an organization while losing the mindset. So in fact, it is really having this kind of balance between being aware of these polarities and well, using the instrument in the right way to bring them into practice.
Beautifully said, my friend. There, tremendous wisdom in what you're sharing in the book and what have, and so much to take. So thank you for that. Thank you all around, Ivo. Mudasir, how about you, my friend? Closing thoughts relative to the conversation and the opportunity with Ivo today.
Absolutely. It was great listening to Ivo, and a couple of things that caught my attention is coming to terms with illusion of control requires exploratory mindset, as Ivo mentioned, and also self-awareness and willing to let go our control or need of certainty and in control. And as we talk about that side as navigating the reality, so it that was a very striking work that we both do and what Evo is talking about, and the polarities, bridging the polarization and divisiveness requires implicit thinking, listening, and self-talking and listening what we are seeing from polarities and seek the common ground.
Did we lose you, Mudasir?
It can apply the entities or organizations, as Evo was. Now, can you guys hear me? Yeah. As I was talking about the bridging the polarization and how well Evo gave the real-time examples, all that stuff, and I can categorize it as a self and a group of people and entities or organizations where all it is willingness to seek the common ground and from the polarities.
Yeah. Very beautifully said. Very beautifully said. You know, and my closing thought, there is so much in the book as a contribution to the human journey, Ivo, and it's tremendous. I really encourage everyone to look at it. And what I observe in myself and others is we have to be very deliberate not to lose the magic that exists around us and within us and with each other, because we've numbed ourselves to it. And because we've tried to get rid of the tension, get rid of paradox, put it to the side, we don't observe ourselves. So I want to just say very, very directly, thank you for contributing, if you will, such a powerful book and wisdom to help reconnect us back to that as we continue the human journey. Because without that, we might as well be done, if you will. So thank you.
Thank you, because the magic it's all about that. It is having this point where two things come together and you say, well, this is really where, well, where it's all about. This is the sense-making moment. Huh?
Yeah. And if you, and I know I haven't shared it with you, Ivo, but I'm very open about it. I definitively, Mudasir very well knows. For me, I've had experiences with death, and the magic of understanding death relative to life is incredible. I see, respectfully, I'm selfish that way. I see magic and I thrive off of it because of my experience with death. Had I not experienced that, I would be a far less, animated, let alone living human being. So thank you, my good friend, for the contributions that you've made to the world.
Thank you very much. And great. And if people want to, let's say, test their own paradoxical skills, they're on my website or they're in the book. So that's also interesting to see. Well, where are you compared to these skills? These skills that are important for the future.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ivo. Thank you so much, Mudasir. We thank everyone for joining us. Likewise, and we look forward to future conversations. And Ivo, we look forward to your next book, my good friend. Hopefully,
all right. Okay.
Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye. Nice for having me. Bye-bye.
You're most welcome.
Bye.
Take care.